Welcome to the Love Your Life and Yourself podcast, the weekly show where science meets soul and mom chaos meets mind mastery. You're not just a mom. You're a woman with dreams, a career, a body that needs care, and a soul that craves more. This podcast is your permission slip to stop surviving and start thriving in motherhood, health, career, and stress resilience. I'm your host, Dr. Ashley Rath, and every week we bring you actionable insights and transformative conversations to help you create a life you truly love. From evidence-based wellness strategies to authentic self-discovery, we'll explore what it takes to thrive through expert interviews and real unfiltered stories. Let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back to Love Your Life and Yourself podcast. You guys are in for a treat today. Today's guest is someone whose work has helped thousands of moms rewrite the script around business, motherhood, and alignment. We have Lauren Golden, the founder of the Free Mama Movement, best-selling author, business mentor, and proud mama of 3. She helps ditch the hustle culture and build lives that feel as good as they look. Welcome, Lauren.
I love that. I think that is beautiful. That's not something I say, but I might need to borrow it for marketing purposes because who doesn't want that, right? You want to feel like what you're projecting out to the world. And I think when we have a lot of insincerity these days online, like who doesn't want a life that feels as good as it looks? I mean, that's brilliant. I'm hiring you as my new marketer. That is amazing. I
Well,
love that.
I'll be honest, a little bit of AI and ChatGPT
Okay. Yes.
and me
We believe
researching
you.
and telling it, this is what she does. And so I can't
Yeah.
take full credit, but
Well, that's
AI
good.
and
Yes.
my
Thank you, Chat.
digging did the work. So,
Perfect.
work smarter, not harder, right? These days,
I'm a
like,
big fan.
as a
Big fan.
business, that's something that I'm not willing to sugarcoat that I use. So anyway, I always open every podcast with this. Lauren, what does love in your life and yourself mean to you right now in this season of your life?
What a great question. I think for me, it looks like self-awareness. I've always been pretty self-aware. But I think to love yourself, it looks like accepting all of you. And to do that, I think you have to be really in touch with not just your strengths, but your weaknesses and accepting your weaknesses of like, this might not be the thing that I'm awesome at, but also your strengths. And this is the side I think I see women struggle with is we might be really good at something. We kind of downplay it. We've been sort of conditioned to be the more, I think, humble gender. And I think really accepting, like, I am really good at this thing and I'm not as great at that thing. And that's okay. Like, that's just who I am. So it looks like self awareness, it looks like acceptance. And then as far as loving your life, I think it looks like balancing change with gratitude. So, like, what are you
Mm,
grateful that you already have? What did you not used to have that you used to wish for or pray for or work towards that now maybe you're taking for granted because it's become your new normal? But how can we get really rooted in being grateful for that? And then when there are things about your life that maybe you wish looked differently, what are you doing to change that thing instead of just accepting it as the way that things are? So it's kind of this balance between, I think, gratitude and change.
I love that. I'm just writing notes because I want to expand on so much that you
Yeah,
just said, and my
let's do
brain
it.
it works sometimes faster than my mouth does. And so I'm like, crap, I don't want to forget that and dive deeper. So I love that you said a couple things. Grateful for the change was one of the things that I wrote down. And I think change is really hard for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think, like, I just look at my patients. Actually, let's back up. You have a business, like, you had a Facebook group of how many tens of thousands of people?
There's like 46,000 people.
Okay, so not
Mhm.
this like tiny little like community, like it was tens of thousands of people. And these are like mostly like entrepreneurs or freelancers of some sort. Most of
Mhm.
them had
Or
businesses
aspiring moms,
or
who
aspiring.
want that.
Yes.
Hmm.
Okay. You probably, when you were talking about like loving your life and yourself, you had mentioned that loving yourself looks it, I can't remember the word you said. I didn't write fast enough. But
Acceptance,
yes,
strengths and weaknesses.
yes, the strengths and weaknesses aspect of like who we
Hmm.
are as a person.
Hmm.
And when you look back at that business and now you've pivoted off of this, you closed this Facebook group,
I
like
did.
that couldn't have been. And I literally, like, I met you through literally cold calling.
Yeah.
Well, not cold calling because I didn't
Yeah.
have your number, but
Yeah.
cold, like, reach out, DM.
Uh-huh.
Like, you look like you have a sweet business going on. Like, I want to get to know you.
Hmm.
And you were right at that transition spot. And
Hmm.
that change probably wasn't this easy.
No.
Tell me about
No.
that. Walk me through that.
Yeah. Well, to put it through the lens of your question, Ashley, closing that Facebook group was a radical act of self-love. It,
Mm,
it, it for a lot of people was probably a really stupid business decision, but that was a radical act of self-love. My goal is to actually move completely off of social media, which is really interesting for a business that was built entirely on social media.
yes.
But it is not a place that brings me joy anymore. I
Mm,
just, I think I'm a little jaded. I got to see under the rug and behind the curtain of a lot of businesses as I grew in success and joined different masterminds. I see a lot of things that are misleading. I see a lot of people who I know for a fact are very disingenuous. And it affects me. It affects me on a really deep level to then be there and sort of see what's going on because I know authenticity and integrity, they become these buzzwords, but I am who I am. And one of the biggest compliments that I've gotten over and over is when free mamas will come meet me in real life and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're exactly the same as you are online." And I'm like, yeah. And I
yeah.
kind of forget that actually a lot of people are not. And it
Can you give
can
me
be
an
really,
example of that? Sorry, I interrupted
well,
you, but
I'm not someone who will give a person's name away,
no, of
but
course not.
yeah, yeah. So, well, I have a couple examples. So one name I will give you. So Russell Brunson was one of my early mentors. My first business coach was one of Russell's early students. So kind of this like grandfather of business coaching. And then eventually I was in some of his programs as well. So Russell alone is an example because on stage or online, he looks like this crazy charismatic guy, this great marketer. He looks like he is in his absolute zone of genius when he is speaking and presenting. But if you hang out with Russell one on one, he is actually very introverted. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but like almost to the point that it's like awkward. Like he's actually
Huh,
quite painfully shy in a
really?
small group or even like a one-on-one setting if he's not, if he doesn't know you very well. So I think we get this image, and we'll go with that example, but you know, we get this image of who we think people are based on when they're selling to us, when they are polished, they're editing it, it's their best take that they're putting forward, and then sometimes it doesn't match with maybe who they are if you walked up to them on the street. Now, I'm not
Mm,
trying to knock Russell. I think what that is an example of is not letting maybe your natural wiring getting in the way of your success, right? But we
correct.
have a
Yeah.
lot of people come into the free mom and they're like, well, I'm too shy, I'm too introverted, I can't do this. And I'm like, this guy's like making hundreds of millions of dollars and he is the shyest person I have ever met, quietly, right? Like off the
Right.
stage.
Yeah.
And so that was a skill he had to learn, practice, fine tune. Even me, I'm very extroverted. I love to talk, but you can go watch my early Facebook lives from like 2017. I am like shaking. I am so scared and nervous. I'm still bubbly and charismatic and chatty, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't hard. So I know we've kind of derailed, but like I just think we get this perception of who people are and it doesn't always match. And so that's like the jading. Now Russell's kind of an innocent example. I've met people who literally, they're telling people that they're selling freedom and they only work 2 hours a day and all this stuff. And
Mm,
then I've met them behind the scenes. They're working 60-hour weeks. They're killing their team. They're miserable. They never see their kids. That's really the part that led me to the point of I needed some boundaries, Ashley. Like, I'm like, I can no longer show up for my paid clients because I'm so disheartened by what I'm seeing when I'm on social media. And so for me, that was like a radical act of self love, but also the way that I could best show up for my audience was to move somewhere else, to be somewhere where it felt safe, where it felt genuine, where it felt kind. And so, yeah, that was the initiation of why we
Mm.
wanted to move off. But yeah, it was a really hard decision to make that change.
Was there something that, like, put you over the edge, or was this kinda just like a gradual burn? Like, it was like, "Oh my gosh, like, I can start to notice I'm not as excited about this," or was there, like, this event, like, boom, happened and you're like, "I'm done."
Both. So there was
Oh,
there was
okay.
an event that happened several years ago, and we won't go into the whole backstory, but we were going through a difficult time as a family. I had become part of this mastermind, and that was kind of when that was my first peek behind the curtain. I think that a lot of people were selling something that did not match their reality of their life. So
Mm,
they were presenting online as someone very different than what was actually happening behind the scenes. So not like an introvert extrovert thing like
right,
Russell, but that very out of integrity, like what they said their life looked like was not actually what their life and business looks like. And so that was sort of the beginning where like I couldn't unsee it, right? And
right.
then I started to notice it more and I started to hear different stories. And keep in mind, my whole business is coaching freelancers. So they're off working for a lot of these entrepreneurs. And I'm there. And so they'll come confide in me of, oh my gosh, this person's contacting me on Sundays and screaming at me, but they're presenting themselves as this like Christian entrepreneur and all this stuff. And she's like, I would hear story after story. And so then was the slow burn of like, is it everywhere? Is it everyone? Like, I
Mm,
really, like, for a while, I really pulled back from social media myself and sharing. And then I had a really good friend who was kind of like, you need to go be the light because people need to know that not everybody's like that. And so then that was kind of encouraging again. But then the universe kind of started delivering all these little examples. And actually, I just got another one this week. But I started meeting all these entrepreneurs who have made the decision to leave social media. And I
mm,
don't think that was an accident. I think it was all these little breadcrumbs of like, we want proof, whether it's subconscious or conscious, we want to know that something's possible. And so, I built this entire community, this entire business off of social media. And I think a lot of my resistance was like, well, what if I break it all? Like,
right.
what if it doesn't work? What if I can't figure it out? And then all of a sudden, all these people started coming in my life. I mean, I can think of four examples. Again, one as recently as this week that are building their businesses completely off of social media, but they started there or they were there at some
Yeah,
point. And now they're doing it other ways. And so I just think sometimes we have to find that framework. We have to find that example of like, oh, this is possible. But it was a slow burn after that. And then the final catalyst that then I brought the idea to my team of like, what if we did this was actually last summer, almost a year ago. In July of last year, I took a month sabbatical, me personally. I was like, I took the apps off my phone. I put a blocker on my Chrome extension because, how many times habitually do we just type in Facebook or whatever? And so I
mhm.
put all these safeguards in place and I was not on social media at all for 31 days for the whole month of July.
Wow.
And it was probably the happiest I've been in a really, really long time. Like I did daily like pulse checks of like, how are we feeling? What is this like? I did a YouTube video about it. Like the first couple days, it was hard not to it was almost startling how much of a habit it was. Like I'd pick up my phone and be like, oh yeah, I don't have it. Or I'd type it in the Chrome blocker and I was like, oh my gosh, really? I've made it like 24 hours. Like it was startling how addicting it really was and just how habitual it was. But by the end, I had so much inner peace that I had really been lacking for a long time. And so that was the catalyst of bringing it to my team and saying, what if we do this differently? What could that look like? What would that look like? And then ultimately we made that decision and move forward.
That's incredible. I, like, have full body goosebumps when you literally said, like, you didn't even realize how much I'm curious, when, like, there's the stats on your phone, how much
Hmm.
time did you have when you were not mindlessly scrolling. Do you have that stat
I
or
don't. I
okay.
don't. I could definitely go look back. I pay attention. I haven't looked like by app. My
Yeah.
other downfall was I would watch like a show on my phone. And sometimes it would be like while I was running on the treadmill or
Well,
something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
So I would have like my daily hours, but that's actually something I recently took off as well. I took Netflix off my phone. I took, Disney Plus off my phone. Like I got rid of all of it. And I think I'm going to do like another summer sabbatical where it's gone, the social media stuff. And I really am working my way into just not having
Yeah.
it.
And
So,
I think that's so huge. Like we like personally, I'm on or I have like a social media presence every single day with the office, with my personal brand, with speaking. And so like I would say for most entrepreneurs, they can't even fathom not being
yeah.
on social media
Hmm.
if from a business standpoint. They could probably
Yeah.
think about from a personal standpoint, but there's so much overlap. Like you
Hmm.
go on, you check stats, you're checking the back end stuff,
Yeah.
you're checking campaigns, etc. Like h- how does one like where do you start? Where
Yeah.
where do you start?
Well, and I mean, we haven't made a complete migration, but I'm happy to share exactly what we're doing. So I will be returning to YouTube, which was something that I used early on in my business, which actually we launched YouTube in, I think, January of 2019. And the reason I launched my YouTube channel in the first place was because I had lost my Facebook ads account. It had
Mm,
gotten blocked for an ad, and I freaked out because that had been like, this was back in the heyday of ads. And
yeah,
so that was how I was building everything. And I just realized, like, wow, with only one strategy in this type of business model, my hands are really tied if something happens. And so that was the catalyst for launching YouTube in the first place. Now, I had mentioned earlier the year when I kind of joined the mastermind, we had the family issues and all of that. And then the following year, we traveled in an RV full time. And so none of that was super conducive to my YouTube channel. But that at the time was one of our biggest, it was our biggest source of organic leads for years, for like 5 or 6 years. And so YouTube is something that I'll be revisiting, because I think we all feel like short form video is the only thing that people are paying attention to, but that's not entirely true. People are still going to YouTube to have questions answered. People are still going to YouTube to be entertained. And so that will be an approach that we dive back into. Paid advertising. So you will still see me on Meta. I will just be paying for it. I'm not going to be doing the day to day, that kind of stuff. So we'll have really specific campaigns to really specific offers that we'll be rotating through. And then the third, obviously, I guess I should have said 4 strategies. So one is the email. I do have an email list. I do not believe all businesses need an email list, but I do think businesses that serve in a one-to-many model, or if you were at a scalable level, you absolutely need an email list.
mm-hmm,
So those first 2 strategies will feed into the growth of the email list as well. And then the final one is affiliate marketing.
mm,
So really focusing on relationships and partners, and
mm-hmm,
our members, we think, have the capacity to be the best source of leads for us, because if
yeah,
they're happy and they are enjoying what they're a part of, then they've already been doing it anyway, is the thing. This
yeah,
isn't a new business. For 8 years, people have been bringing us referrals. We now just have a better infrastructure to be able to compensate people for that.
yeah.
So that's really where our focus will be going.
I love that. And like all scalable at the same time. Like
For sure.
you don't have to, post every single day.
Mhm.
You can, but I think every person is different. Like where social media was very draining, it was not in alignment, where other people it is, but
Totally.
which is totally fine. So I'm giving you permission if you're like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. Like follow your gut, like do
Yeah.
what's right for you. And if it's not, it's not. And if it is, awesome. So cool. I'm entertaining all of those. So yeah, I love it. Anyway, so you have now this like off social media group of women, and you've coached, thousands of women. on these beliefs, speaking of like belief systems, right? And what we think we need to do for survival. And you see these high achieving moms, mostly moms and women, i- carry this like unconscious thought patterns that keep them stuck. So
Mhm.
how do you start to break free from that? Like how do you navigate this stuck pattern? I guess you could ask.
Mhm. Me personally, or how do I coach them there? Because
Maybe both. I don't know.
well, so one of the biggest things that I see my students struggle with, and women in general, is this idea of confidence. And this was not my biggest challenge. I've had plenty of other challenges. My biggest limiting belief when I first started my business was being all consumed by what other people were thinking about me. I was just absolutely paranoid of, are people going to like me? Are they going to think I'm stupid? What if everybody sees me fail? Like that was very much my narrative. And I'm sure there is some sort of tie in. I also had very perfectionist tendencies. So it had to be right. And I had to really redefine what some of these things meant. Do I care more about what other people may or may not think about me, or do I care more about what I think about myself? That was a big repositioning. And I ultimately, obviously, landed like, I care more of what I think about myself. I've always been extremely motivated by the fear of regret. So to me, the fear of regret is substantially larger than the fear of failure. I would rather try and not have it work than never know and have to live with the fact that I never even did anything about it, right? So this all kind of goes back into that whole change conversation from the beginning. I think you have to not be afraid of change. And something I was thinking earlier, Ashley, was, with change, an observation I've made that's really curious to me is I think most people want a change. I think most people are out there looking for something in their life to change. Now, I think capitalism has a lot to do with this, right? We're constantly being fed ads and commercials that tell us not to like your stomach, not to like your face, not to like your hair. Like, a lot of these messages aren't our own, but it's like we want to be thinner, we want to be wealthier, we want to be with our kids, like whatever those things are, whether the desires are internal or being given to us. Most people want something to change. But what I've learned is when it comes for things to actually change, we're terrified to change. We are so terrified to get outside of our normal, our comfort zone, our present thing. And the best analogy that I have for this is I had a boyfriend in high school. It got really unhealthy. We were together for like 3.5 years. We went through a lot together. And it got really unhealthy, and we'd like break up and get back together and break up and get back together. And it was because even though we were unhappy, we were more comfortable with
Mhm.
each other, knowing how to be with each other, than to go out and have to be alone. Like
Mhm.
that we had forgotten how to do. And that's how I think people kind of go through their adult life, if I'm honest. I think most people are like, well, I want a nicer house. I want my debt to be paid off. I want, to be thinner. I just don't really want to have to change my diet, track my macros, go to the gym, start a business, talk to like we're almost unwilling to do the thing to have the change because it feels so scary. So this comes back to the biggest challenge that I see women face, which I think is the lie of confidence. And the lie of confidence is that you need to feel confident about something before you go do it, right? Well, when I feel confident as a copywriter, then I will be able to go market my copywriting business. When I feel confident as a coach, I'll start my coaching business. And it's like, that's not how confidence works. Confidence is literally a byproduct of getting your reps in, right? It is a byproduct of experience. We feel confident about something that we know how to do. Well, you can't know how to do something without going and actually doing it. So, something that we talk a lot about in the free mama community is courage. You don't need confidence. Confidence is earned. It is not handed to you. You can't, I see people selling confidence. When I see a quote unquote confidence coach, my eyes roll in the back of my head, Ashley, because, and I get it, to an extent it's probably just marketing, but you can't buy confidence. You have to go earn it through your
Mhm.
action, right?
Yeah.
So I always think of myself as an activator for my, like, I coach terminology, it's whatever, but really I'm an activator for women. I want
Words
to
are
help you
powerful
get,
though.
yeah, I want to help you get out of your own way and go start doing the thing. Literally just this week, I recorded a new like mini workshop. It's like 30 minutes and it's called the Get Paid First Workshop. And it's literally for someone who has never started freelancing, like never done anything. And I tell them exactly what they're going to go sell and do because like if you can watch the workshop, you probably know how to check email or do whatever, right? So I give them a really basic admin task and I tell them exactly what they're going to go post on social media or tell to their friends or send to like a business owner they might know. Like it's completely spelled out. And I tell them, this is not about building your business. Like you might not want to do this in your business. This is not the rate you're going to charge. This is your activator plan. Because when you go out and do it and you don't wait 3 months for everything to be right or everything to be perfect or for you to feel ready, all of these are in air quotes. I know you guys are listening. I have little bunny air quotes going wild because none of these things are real, right? It's like, how do we get into motion quickly? We have to move fast and we have to be objective about it, that we're just collecting data, right? We're just getting information. What are people responding to? What's working? What's not working? But what I see happen that I think is really detrimental to the female mind is we wait until we're ready. And then as soon as anything doesn't work, as soon as we do put ourselves out there, whether that is a Facebook post that didn't get enough likes in your mind, or you have your first sales call and they hire someone else, then we immediately tell ourselves, I'm a failure. I knew it. I shouldn't have done it. Instead of just going, oh, okay, cool. Well, why did you decide to go with someone else? Right? We don't look at it objectively. Well, I went with someone else because they had a background in what my industry does. And so maybe they knew, oh, cool. Well, how do we argue with that? That has nothing to do with you. That's not personal. Move on to the next one. Right. So I think speed is something that is really important, and not speed equivalent to hustle, but speed kind of perpendicular to waiting. I see
Mm-hmm.
so many women waiting, and we don't want to wait until we're ready. We want to move forward swiftly because that is what is going to prepare us. So that's kind of what I see as the biggest downfall, is this confidence lie. And then we're waiting for confidence that it's not going to show up until you get in motion.
I think you have hit every nugget that I have ever felt in business ever. I
Well,
mean,
that's awesome.
for real. I I've been in business for 10 years now.
Yeah.
Actually more than 10 years.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And I've started two practices. I've started my own like personal brand, and I can tell you
Yeah.
I have felt all of those things at some
Yeah.
point in my journey. And I think, like, especially this podcast, like, y'all are listening, these are the first few episodes that we've ever done.
Yeah.
And I can tell we live in a very, very rural area, very small town where the majority of people know who everyone is.
Mm-hmm.
And the quote, "Do I care more about myself or what other people think?" has crossed my mind more than I can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we graduate with literally like 50 people in a class here in this rural town. And so I know all the parents, all the kids, and it's like, "Oh my gosh, like I have gone through in my head, like, what is everyone going to think? Like, oh, she's starting a podcast. Oh, she wrote a book. Oh, she's just trying to do XYZ." And I feel like that stuff can come into your head, and it makes you human, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't get me wrong, Lauren, have you ever had those thoughts in business?
1000%. That's almost why I didn't start. Yeah, that's how I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
the thing is, so like not shaming or guilting yourself for having that,
No.
just being like,
No.
you know what? I'm not going to pay attention to those. And I'm
Yeah.
going to think about, okay, yes, I had those, acknowledging that thought,
Mm-hmm.
but, and I don't use but all the time, but I'm purposely using it because I want to negate everything that my
Yeah.
brain just said. But what if, because the reason you're probably starting a business or thinking about starting a business or going to do the thing or get healthier, what if I help myself more? What if I help someone else more? I just had a patient in yesterday. I'm not going to share any names, but she's been walking more at at work, and she has a fairly decent sized work where there's, a couple hundred people there. And we were talking about how beneficial just walking and weighted walking is. And so I mentioned, I was like, hey, have you ever considered walking with a weighted vest? And she's like, I actually have a weighted vest. I was like, oh, great, put it on. And she's like, well, what are people going to think of me at my work if I wear a weighted vest? And I was like,
Yeah.
who cares?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what are people going to think of you when you are streaming past them and the healthiest you've ever been? And so this shit, it's so prevalent in us women. Like, what are people going to think? What are people going to think when I start a podcast or write a book or start a business or try to help them with their hormone? Like, you can play the what if game of what other people are going to think. But realistically, number one, most people are thinking about themselves way more than you. Let's just be real. And they're going to talk regardless. So if they want to bash you, they're going to find something to bash you about.
And it says more about them than
Yes.
it says about you.
Yes.
You know, somebody who's going to have maybe shaming thoughts about a woman who is trying to prioritize her health, that is coming from their own place of discomfort, and I know this feels dramatic, but potentially self-loathing. Like there's like a jealousy there of like, they're not getting up and doing it, or there's some that it has nothing to do with your client. And so I think that's something else that's really important to remember is, there's a saying, it's something like your thoughts about me are none of my business, or but you know what I'm talking about. There's some quote there. And it's true, because it doesn't matter. And so we get to develop thick skin. We get to know that, we maybe are in the minority of people who are actively bettering ourselves, but then we also get to find a community of people who are also going to be on that path, because you're not alone. But I really do think, unfortunately, that we are the minority. Those of us who are crazy enough to start a business or crazy enough to go really pursue their health, it's just not the masses. And so you've got to find your people, whether that's, listening to Ashley's podcast or joining a community or finding a coach or whatever that is, but you need to find a support system that is going to keep you growing. Because people who are not ready for change where they are they're going to be a lot more comfortable with you coming back down to their level.
Oh, I 100% agree. And I think many of the listeners are torn between wanting more and being afraid of being like too much. Maybe that's too much with their own family or their own friends. So what advice would you give the listeners? So how do you navigate this ambition of wanting more or being healthier or freedom, whether that's time or financial or social? Like, what would you tell them of wanting, like, if them being afraid to want too much without the guilt, the shame, the judgment?
I think that it really starts with putting blinders on and learning to define things for yourself. And whether that means moving away from family expectations, society's expectations, a coach's expectation. I mean, I had a wonderful girl that was on my team who had a coach that was just kept pushing her for more, but she didn't want more. She was really happy in her business. And so, I know we hear these messages a lot. I think it kind of started with Rachel Hollis, maybe even before her, but you were meant for more, you were meant for more. I think we have to do two things, Ashley. Number one, I think we have to define what is more. What do I want? What am I striving towards? And it doesn't have to be your forever goal, because I learned very early on in business, once you start shattering your own glass ceilings, like anything's possible, but like, what is your current target? What are you focused on? And then the other thing we have to define is what is enough. And this is something that when you find success in your health, in financially, whatever it is, this is something that very few people are talking about. But as a high achiever who has worked with a lot of high achievers, and I think I am speaking to a fellow high achiever, this is something that will really sneak up on you and bite you in the tail, is if you haven't defined what enough is. So some of us who are like goal getters, it's like, Pew, and we talked about this, I think, before we hit record. It's like, Pew wrote the book, Pew started the podcast, like Pew, maybe made $1 million or 10 million or whatever your thing is. And it's like, we're knocking them down. It's what's next. And two things happen. Number one, If we don't take time to celebrate and like really acknowledge what we've done, we're really chasing our life away instead of like being present in the moment. And so that is something that a yoga practice, and whether you meditate or journal or pray, having something that really grounds you in the present, I think really will counteract that. But I used to be a chaser. It was like, not did that, what's next? Did that, started my YouTube, did my podcast, wrote a book, wrote another book, hit $1 million, like spoke on stage, like, it was like just climbing. But then you kind of look around, and this is the other thing that can happen, is I looked around at one point and I was like, I like didn't even recognize my business anymore. I was like, I had built so many things out of achievement or comparison to my peers, or someone had told me, well, this is the next thing. Oh, you've done that, now you go launch a high ticket program. Oh, you have that, now you go do this thing. That I kind of looked around and I was like, wait, like, what do I want my business to look like? And so what was really interesting for me in that season was I was making probably about 3 times what I was making earlier on in my business, when it was still successful, but now I was making 3x that, but I was working harder. I was paying myself the same. And all
Mm-hmm.
I had really collected was a bunch of accolades to write on my podcast introduction for, it was like, what am I doing this for? And so I had sort of lost myself. So I think, if you feel like you want more, no one is going to cheer you on louder than me. And no one is going to like push you to, like we said, I'm an activator. Like, I want to help you get out of your own way and do it. And as you start climbing, especially my high performers, you got to know, like, what's the target? What do you want and why? This is something I always ask my students when we do our goal setting at the end of the year and we like do some annual planning. You can't just say what your goals are. You have to say why. Why do you want that goal?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that important to you? What is it accomplishing? What is it helping accomplish broader in your business, broader in your mission, or for you personally? Because if we're just chasing accolades, you're just going to be working harder, so you've got to know why you want it. And then what's your enough thing, because so we'll bring this down to like the freelancing level. Someone will want to quit their job. Okay, cool. They quit their job. Now let's say they're making 5K months. And then they're like, I want to hit 10K months. Cool. They're hitting 10K months. And they're like, now I want to hit 15, except at the same time, they're showing up to calls. They're crying. They're telling me their marriage isn't good. They missed this thing at their kid. And I'm like, wait, why'd you start freelancing again?
Mm-hmm.
So I think sometimes we lose track of like, why did you get into business, like personally? And so it's what's enough. When's it going to be enough? And what I realized for me is I spent a long time as an entrepreneur focused on my revenue goal and not focused on my take home goal. Like, what am I paying myself? And that was really coming from a place of ego. Actually, I wanted to be able to tell other people what my business earned. I wanted to get the award at the stage at the marketing event, or all those different, that like I wanted to check the box. And I wasn't that's not actually the kind of company that I want to have. I'm not looking to go public someday. I don't want a big office building with a huge staff. Like, that's not what I want in this season of my life when my kids are home. I've always identified as a lifestyle entrepreneur. And so when your business starts to take over your life, all of a sudden you're out of integrity, right? You're
Right.
not really
Mm-hmm.
living what you said you wanted to do anymore. So I think it is a balance that requires some checking in with yourself. What is more, and then what is enough is what I think you need to ask yourself.
I love that. So what's one non-negotiable thing, habit, or mindset that keeps you grounded as your business grows and evolves, and the life that you actually want? Like, what do you always come back to? Is it those questions? Like, is it the simple questions of like, what do I want? Or is it more than
I
that?
do. I check in with that for sure. I think it's more than that. I think for me, the word that just keeps showing up for me is boundaries. And I know so many
Mm.
women that struggle with boundaries. But I have boundaries. I have boundaries with my family. And when I say I need alone time, I have boundaries that allow me to take care of my body every single day. I have boundaries in my life that dictate what my workday looks like. And all of these things keep me accountable to the other areas of my life. I think work life balance gets pooped on a lot. I think it's not real. And I think people are looking at it incorrectly. Work life balance is not a target that then you achieve and you're done. work-life balance is one of the most fluid
Yes.
topics. It is
Yes.
constantly moving. And so boundaries are what helps me make sure that I'm never skewing too far to one side. If I have a work event coming up that is going to take me away from my babies for a few days, I'm going to be really cognizant of how I spend my time with my family, either before or after.
Yeah.
On the flip side, I did not work very much at all in the month of April because my husband was gone for 3 weeks. And so, literally, after this interview, I am leaving the city to go stay in a hotel for 2 nights by myself to both just have some refresh alone time, but also to be able to do some really deep diving on some projects that I can't do within the four walls of my home when I have 3 children here. So
Right.
there has to be this, and those are two more extreme examples. That's not something I'm doing every day where I'm at a work trip or I'm leaving my family, but that's how I kind of get back into that alignment. But it's having those boundaries and then having the support, a partner, my children, a team that sort of help maintain those boundaries so that I never feel out of whack. I can always make sure that everybody's needs are being met. And that includes my own, which I think is something a lot of women struggle
Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing that you teach all of these concepts. You have a book,
with.
you
I do.
have a program called Peace, Passion, and Profit. You have the Free Mama Movement group
Yep.
off social media.
It is off social media. It's a great
So
platform, though.
uh, maybe tell us a little bit about um, like what you do, how you do it, like
Yeah.
what you're working on, etc. You have any cool things coming up?
Well, yes, the thing I'm most looking forward to, we are doing another Free Mama cruise. That is not until next year, but if you want to go on a cruise and you want to write it off as a business expense, I'm your girl. Reach out. So that's what I'm looking forward to. But we're getting ready to launch a new training, which is exciting. Um, so at the Free Mama, what I do is I help women start and grow a freelancing business. That's what I help them do. It gives them the opportunity to become a business owner, have more time flexibility, have more financial flexibility without feeling like you have to, go invent some Shark Tank business idea or start from scratch or, go down the MLM route that I think for a lot of women doesn't feel in alignment for them. And statistically speaking, does not lead most women to success. So that's what I do. Like Ashley said, we have a lot of programs and books that help people do that. On the simple level, if your curiosity is piqued during this conversation, you can jump on Amazon. You can find the Free Mama book or the Start an Online Business book. I'm sure they'll be in show notes as well. And
Mm-hmm.
then we have the community that Ashley is actually a part of. She's also come and presented in front of. This is our Free Mama movement. This is what has replaced our Facebook group, but we have also really enhanced it. So we have monthly connection calls where we do breakout and networking groups. We have quarterly virtual events where you can learn from experts like Ashley about business and wellness because I coach very holistically. I think, in alignment of this conversation of peace, passion, and profit, it's great to learn to make a bunch of money. But if your health is suffering and your relationships are suffering and you're absolutely miserable, that doesn't really sound very enticing to most of us, right? And on the flip side, your relationships could be great and you could be really excited about what you're doing. But I think we all know that if there is a huge financial gap in your family, that also is very anxiety inducing. If you can't pay your bills, if you never get a vacation or you have a lot of debt, that's also very, very overwhelming. So I really coach from like the whole perspective of making sure that your family, your soul, is all in alignment. And like Ashley mentioned, we have two programs. We have Freedom Founder Society. This has my coaching curriculum for starting an online business, as well as coaching. And then my Peace, Passion, Profit is some one-on-one coaching access where we will laser focus on 3 of your goals, why they're important to you, and then help you knock those out in about 90 days. So lots of ways to connect. And I would love to hear from you.
Yeah. So we'll have all of the links and stuff in the show notes. To wrap up, I always start and end with the same question. So, what's one piece of advice, which you have given so many nuggets, but you get to give one more, you'd give to our audience trying to love their lives and themselves more fully?
I'm a very practical person. So I would say to get out a pen and paper and make a list of what's working and what's not working. You know, let's start by identifying where you're at. It kind of goes back to the first question of like, I think when you first asked, what do I do to love that? And I think the first thing I said was self awareness. And
Mm-hmm.
I think we can get really lost in our feelings. I can think back to some of the hardest times in my life and when I felt very alone or I felt very overwhelmed. We can kind of feel drowning in those emotions. But I think if we can use a more logical tool to help us really center ourselves and really ask ourselves, not how am I feeling, but like, where am I at objectively in time and space with myself, with my family, with my partner, with my home, with my career, and really look at like what's working and be really honest. Like, and sometimes that's hard to see, especially if you're in a harder place. So maybe you might need to crowdsource a little bit, right? But finding those radical gratitudes, maybe you're really grateful that you have a car that is reliable and can take you places. Maybe you're really grateful that your children are really healthy, because I've been following a friend lately whose child has been dealing with cancer. And every day I
Mm-hmm.
wake up and I am just like, I just have to take a moment to recognize how easy I've got it compared to some people in the world. And we could all do this, right? But so find those radical gratitudes, even when you're feeling low, but then be honest with yourself about what's not working. If you are miserable at your job, there is a path for you to be able to do something about that. If you are unhappy in your relationship, there is support out there to help you and your partner work on that, if that is the best next step for you. Like, if there's something going on with a kiddo, then you need to go advocate for them. But I think we have to sometimes get out of our feelings and get into some practical steps about, okay, what's working really great and where can I find that gratitude that's going to root me in like everything's probably actually okay, you know? Um, and then, okay, how can we make this better? So that's what I would do. I know that's like a very crunchy, tangible step, but I would get it on paper, and sort of out of your emotions. And then I will give this to you actually, if you would like to gift it to everybody, but I
Sure.
have a mindset framework that I walk people through. It's called the 3N3C framework. I won't go through the whole thing. We'll leave it as a little cliffhanger. But I will give Ashley a PDF download of that. We typically don't give that away, but I feel like if you're in that mindset place where you are not actively loving yourself and loving your life, there's probably some mindset junk going on there. So I would like to give you that mindset tool that I teach all of my students that you can give to your listeners.
Well, thank you.
You're so welcome.
And honestly, I think it's so true that like it seems so simple and practical, but those are the things that, in all
Yep.
honesty, we have to get back to. Like, how do you want to get
Sleep, drink
healthier?
water,
Yes. Yeah.
move your
Sleep,
body.
drink
Yep.
water, move, like
Yeah.
eat
We
real
make
food.
it complicated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for
I
sure.
agree. I agree.
All right, Lauren, thank you so much for being here today. You're just a wealth of knowledge, and I am so
Thank
glad
you.
that I just cold called you and we
The beginning of
connected.
a
So,
beautiful friendship.
yes. Awesome. Until next time, thanks all. Thanks for tuning in to Love Your Life and Yourself. I hope today's episode gave you one more tool or one more truth to help you thrive in your health, happiness, and resilience. Remember, loving yourself isn't selfish, it's leadership. And it's the foundation for building a life that actually feels like yours. If this spoke to you, hit that follow button, leave a review, and send it to a friend who needs to hear it. And if you want to dive even deeper, grab a copy of my #1 best-selling book, Love Your Life and Yourself. It's the heart behind this podcast, and it's helped thousands of women step into a life they actually love. You can find it at drashleyrath.com or through the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care of you and keep choosing to love your life and yourself.